Hi guys, tonight we begin by stepping into the thick, choking fog of a Victorian London morning. The gas lamps glow like dim halos in the gloom, and you can almost hear the distant, shrieking blast of the factory whistle cutting through the damp air. It's the kind of scene that looks atmospheric in a period drama, but if you had to actually live here, especially as an ordinary worker, you would probably regret it before your first shift ended. The reality is simple. Life was brutal, and if you had to survive a single day without labour laws, healthcare, or even a clean glass of water by modern standards, you'd discover quickly that your biggest enemy wasn't some storybook villain, it was the grind. You probably wouldn't last a week, at least not without a few tricks, so before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And if you're listening right now, post your location and the local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world people are tuning in from. The city stirs long before the sun considers the horizon. Your first sensation, even before you open your eyes in the cramped darkness of your rented room, is the smell. It seeps through the single window, warped shut and sealed with rags against the cold. It is a thick, permanent broth of coal smoke from a million hearths, the damp stone odour of the river, and the sharp ammoniac tang from the overfull gutter just below. This is the air of London, and you breathe it in, a taste of the day to come. Outside, a low, distant rumble begins, the sound of the city itself waking. It is not one sound, but 100. The iron-shod wheels of the first delivery wagons clatter over granite cobbles, a noise that will soon become a constant, bone-shaking roar. Somewhere a horse whinnies, impatient or cold. Further off, the deep, mournful blast of a steamship's horn echoes up from the Thames, a sound from another world of iron and steam, yet as regular as a clock here in the dockside districts. If you were to step onto the street in this pre-dawn gloom, you would see the world in shades of grey and ochre. The gas lamps, still lit, cast weak, haloed pools of light that struggle against the famous choking fog. It's not a clean country mist, but a greasy yellow smear that coats your throat and leaves a gritty film on your lips. Shapes move within it. The stooped figure of a crossing sweeper, already at work with his broom clearing a path of horse manure and refuse, for the first gentleman who will later tip him a halfpenny. A night soil man pushes his reeking cart towards the alleys, his thankless task nearly done. From the river's edge comes the slap of water against wood, the shout of a lighterman, and the creak of cranes beginning their daily labour of loading and unloading the Empire's wealth. The city does not wake gently, it lurches into motion, a vast wheezing machine fuelled by poverty and necessity. For you, inside, waking is a careful communal negotiation. The room is not yours alone. In the thick darkness, you hear the breathing of others. Your children are a tangle of limbs in the corner on a straw pallet. Perhaps a lodger shares the second bed, or your older parents. Privacy is a luxury for another class of people. There is no space for modesty, only a practised, weary indifference. You rise, your joints stiff from the damp and the thin mattress. The floorboards are icy. You light a stub of a tallow candle, its sallow flame and greasy smoke adding to the room's heavy atmosphere. Water is drawn from the shared pump in the courtyard below, so cold it makes your teeth ache. You wash your face and hands in the chipped basin, the ritual brisk and functional. There is no lingering. The single room must serve as kitchen, dining room and bedroom, and the morning transformation is swift. The bedclothes are pushed back. A small table is pulled into the centre, and the remains of last night's fire in the tiny grate are poked into a semblance of life to boil a kettle. Breakfast is a silent, hurried affair. The bread, bought yesterday, is already hardening. You cut thick slices, the sound a dry scrape in the quiet room. The tea is weak, brewed from leaves used and reused, until they yield only a faint, bitter stain. A scrape of margarine, a sprinkle of salt, perhaps a sliver of cheese if the week has been good. You eat standing up or perched on the edge of a bed. Words are few, the children are subdued, still wrapped in the blanket's fading warmth. You watch the grey light slowly strengthen at the window, counting the minutes until the factory whistle or the foreman's call. This is not a meal for pleasure or conversation. It is fuel, plain and simple, consumed to fortify the body for the 12 hours of labour to come. The silence is not peaceful. It is the silence of dread, of stored energy, of a family bracing itself against the day. A world away, in the tall terraced houses of Bloomsbury or Kensington, a different dawn chorus is underway. Here, the first sound is not the clatter of wheels, but the soft, slippered tread of servants on back staircases. The house is cold, a vast cave of polished wood and heavy drapery. The maid-of-all-work, her own sleep cut short, has been up for an hour. Her breath plumes in the icy air of the basement kitchen as she blows on last night's embers, coaxing them with kindling and coal into a new fire. The scullery maid is already scrubbing the steps leading to the front door, her red hands numb in the water. Upstairs, the housemaid moves from room to room, drawing back thick curtains to let in the pallid light, emptying chamber pots with a practised lack of expression, and laying fresh fires in grates so the family will wake to the illusion of a naturally warm home. In the breakfast room, a table is being set with a quiet efficiency that borders on ritual. The cloth is white and stiffly starched. Silver cutlery is placed with exact precision. Pots of marmalade, dishes of butter, and racks of toast stand under covered domes to keep warm. The air begins to smell of coffee, real coffee, and the rich, fatty scent of bacon and eggs cooking below. When the master of the house descends, dressed in his sombre suit, the room is prepared as a stage for his morning. He takes his seat and unfolds the Times. The rustle of the broadsheet pages, a sound of authority and insulation. He reads of politics in Parliament, of trade in the colonies, of the great engine of progress. The sounds of the hungry city outside, the very sounds that were your alarm clock, are muffled here by thick glass, heavy curtains and sheer distance. This breakfast is not about fuel, but about order. It is a performance of stability, a daily reaffirmation that the world is in its proper place, with him at the head of the table, served, informed and separate. But beyond the creeping brick tide of the city, where the air still holds the clean, cold scent of frost on earth, another day begins with older rhythms. Here the first light is not gaslit yellow, but a slow, pearly grey spreading from the east. The alarm is not a whistle, but the crowing of a cock, a sound that has measured the dawn for centuries. The cold is sharper, more honest, biting at your cheeks as you step from your cottage door. It is the cold of open fields, not a crowded stone. Your breath hangs in a cloud as you haul water from the well, the bucket coming up heavy and spilling icy drops on the frozen ground. Inside the cottage, the kitchen is the heart, and its heart is the fireplace. You build the fire not from expensive coal, but from wood you chopped yourself, and the peat you cut from the common. The flames catch, dancing over the logs, and the warmth is immediate, radiating into the small room. It is a heat that smells of earth and resin. The family gathers around this hearth, not in silence, but in the quiet murmur of a shared task. Hands stretch towards the flames. The kettle is swung over the fire on its iron arm. Oatmeal bubbles in a pot, a thick porridge that will stick to the ribs through a morning of labour. There might be milk from your own cow, or an egg from your own chickens. The food is simple, often monotonous, but it is yours, grown or raised by your own effort. As you eat, you look out the small leaded window at the fields, their furrows stiff with frost, waiting for the sun's weak touch to soften them. The day's work is written in the landscape itself. There is no foreman's whistle, only the insistent turn of the seasons and the needs of the animals. The city dweller might pity your hardship, your lack of gaslight and paved streets. But in this moment, with the fire cracking and the world outside holding its breath, there is a profound, tangible connection to the turning of the earth, a sense of being part of a cycle far older and in its way more forgiving than the relentless grinding gears of the great grey metropolis already roaring to life 50 miles away. The sound that rules your life is not the chime of a church bell or the call of a market crier, but the relentless shrieking blast of the factory whistle. It tears through the morning fog, a mechanical scream that signals the start of your captivity. You join the river of grey figures flowing through the iron gates, a silent procession of men, women and children, all swallowed by the soot-blackened brick monolith that will consume the next 12 to 14 hours of your existence. Inside, the world transforms. The air is thick, warm and heavy with 1,000,000 floating particles. In the cotton mill, it is a snowstorm of white fibres that catch in your throat, coat your hair, and layer your lungs with a soft, insidious dust. The light filtering through high, grimy windows is drowned out by the gas jets that burn night and day, casting a flickering, hellish glow over the scene. The noise is the first and last thing you perceive, an overwhelming physical force. It is the deafening rhythmic thunder of the steam engine, the great heart of the beast, pounding through the floorboards and into the bones of your feet. It is the shriek and clatter of 1,000 spinning jennies and power looms, a metallic cacophony so complete it erases thought, leaving only a stunned automatic vigilance. Your place is at a machine. Your world shrinks to the few feet of greasy wood and flying metal in front of you. In the steelworks, the heat is a solid wall that pushes against your face, the glow from the furnaces painting everyone in tones of orange and black. Your job is to feed, to turn, to lift, to watch. A single repetitive motion performed 10,000 times a day. In the match factory, the air is acrid with the smell of phosphorus, a sweet, toxic haze that makes your head swim and will, in time, rot your jawbone from the inside. There is no conversation here. The roar of the machinery makes it impossible. Communication is reduced to gestures, to lip reading, to a sharp tap on the shoulder. You become an extension of the machine, your rhythm locked to its relentless pace. A moment's lapse, a thread snagged, a lever missed, and the whole delicate, violent system can shudder, snap, and maim. Your attention cannot wander, for the machine is unforgiving, and the foreman is its prophet. He moves through the aisles, a figure of absolute authority in his dark suit, a watch chain glinting on his waistcoat. His eyes miss nothing. A child nodding off from exhaustion, a woman straightening her aching back for a second too long, a man whose machine has fallen silent for repair. For every infraction there is a fine. A penny for talking, 2p for being late, 3p for a broken tool, whether it was your fault or not. The fines are deducted from your Friday pay packet, a silent, brutal arithmetic that ensures your wages are never quite what you were promised. The clock itself is your enemy, its hands moving with agonizing slowness. You learn to tell time by the ache in your shoulders, by the hollow gnawing in your stomach, by the gradual deepening of the gloom beyond the gaslights. The whistle for the dinner break is a temporary reprieve, a 20-minute scramble to the corner of the room where you swallow cold tea and hard bread, your ears still ringing in the sudden, comparative quiet. Then the whistle screams again, and the machinery, never still, seems to grab you and pull you back into its endless, grinding dance. Among these grey figures, small shapes move with a terrible practiced agility. Children, some as young as 5 or 6, are everywhere. In the textile mills, they are scavengers, crawling fearlessly beneath the moving machinery to gather loose cotton, their small fingers nimble and dangerously close to the unguarded wheels and belts. They are piecers, tasked with repairing broken threads on the spinning frames, their eyes sharp, their hands constantly darting into the clattering mechanism. In the mines, they are trappers, sitting alone in the pitch dark for 12 hours, opening and closing ventilation doors for the coal carts, the world defined by the sound of approaching wheels and the brief, blessed glimpse of a lamp before darkness swallows them again. Their faces are old in the dim light, smudged with grime, their growth stunted by poor food and endless labour. They do not play, they work. Their childhood is measured in shifts, their energy a commodity to be spent until they are used up. And beside them, the women work. In the bleach works, their hands are raw and red from corrosive chemicals. In the pottery factories, they breathe clay dust that silts their lungs. In countless small, airless workshops, they sit in rows sewing shirts or painting trinkets or assembling boxes, their wages often half that of a man for the same interminable day. For many, this public labour is merely the first shift. When the final blessed whistle blows and you stumble out into the evening air, lungs gulping the sooty fog as if it were meadow fresh, your work is not done. If you are a woman, you must queue for food, fight for a place at the communal pump, cook what meagre supper you can afford over a single tired flame, mend clothes, scrub floors, and quiet crying children in the single overcrowded room you call home. Your body is not your own. It is a machine for labour, first for the factory owner, then for your family. The few coins you bring home, clutched tightly in your chapped hand, are not yours to spend. They are measured against the landlord's rent, the baker's bill, the coal merchant's sack. You calculate in fractions of pennies, deciding between a bit more bread or a scrape of butter, a candle for the evening, or saving for a pair of second-hand boots. The wages of the man, if there is one, are often swallowed by the tavern before he reaches home, leaving your pittance to keep the whole precarious structure from collapse. You lie awake at night, not from the cold alone, but from the silent arithmetic of survival, counting days until the next pay, fearing the cough from the pallet in the corner that might signal a doctor's bill you can never pay, dreading the morning's whistle, even as your exhausted body craves oblivion. The factory's grip extends far beyond its walls. It holds your entire life in its iron fist. But the great factories and workshops do not contain all the city's toil. For every soul trapped within brick walls, another fights a more solitary, precarious battle on the cobbled streets themselves. Here, the orchestra of the city is conducted by human voices and the clatter of hooves. Your day might begin with the rhythmic scrape of your broom on stone, not a whistle. You're a crossing sweeper, a small island of order in a sea of muck. You clear a path for the gentleman and the lady, your eyes downcast, your hand outstretched, hoping the penny they toss is not withheld. Your world is measured in footsteps and manure, your survival dependent on the whims of those whose boots you clean. Further down the lane, a cacophony of cries rises above the general din. The costermonger with his barrow of wilted greens and dubious fish belts out his prices in a rhythmic, mournful song. Fresh oysters, sweet turnips. He's a master of persuasion and haste, forever watching for the policeman who might move him on. The air around him is a mix of the sea, the soil, and the gutter. Then comes the thunder of iron on stone, a sound that vibrates up through your legs. The omnibus, a great lumbering wooden beast pulled by two stout horses, fills the narrow street. The driver, perched high above, cracks his whip and shouts, while the conductor, hanging off the back, barks destinations and shoves bodies inside the cramped compartment. You might be that conductor, your hands raw from gripping cold rails, your voice growing hoarse, your body jolted and shaken for miles. Or you might be the cabman, hunched in the damp box of your hansom, the smell of your horse a constant companion, waiting hours for a fare while the rain soaks through your coat. And above it all, quite literally, are the climbers. The small thin boys who are chimney sweeps' apprentices. Covered in a paste of soot and sweat, they're shoved up into the black, narrow flues of the wealthy, scraping with their brushes, breathing in a darkness that is not merely absence of light, but a thick, suffocating powder. They emerge coughing ghosts, their knees and elbows raw, their lungs already seeding with the disease that will likely claim them before manhood. This is the economy of the pavement, a relentless hustle where your body is your stock in trade, and every skill, however dangerous or despised, is a thread in the fraying rope that keeps you from the workhouse. When the distant shrill call of the factory whistle finally signals the dinner hour, a different kind of flood pours into the streets. The river of grey figures reverses its course, not towards home, but towards the warm, yeasty glow of the public house. For these precious minutes, you are not a machine hand or a drudge. You're a man with a penny for a pint of porter. The noise inside is a welcome human roar after the machine scream. It is a thick soup of laughter, shouted arguments, and the clink of pottery. The air is dense with the smells of sawdust, spilled beer, cheap tobacco, and unwashed wool. You squeeze onto a bench. The press of bodies a comfort, a shared warmth. The first long pull of dark, bitter ale is the best sensation of the day. It unknots the tightness in your shoulders and washes the dust from your throat. Here, for a moment, the hierarchy of the factory floor dissolves. The foreman does not drink here. Here you can grumble. You can curse the overlooker, ridicule the master's fine new carriage, and share the grim details of the morning's accident in the spinning room. You can talk of the Chartist meeting in the back room, of the dream of a vote, of a 10-hour day. In the amber light, with a pint in your fist, the dream feels tangible. The exhaustion is still there, but it is softened by camaraderie and the gentle fog of alcohol. This is not just a drink. It is an act of reclaiming a sliver of your humanity, a brief, defiant pause in the day's sentence. But the whistle always blows again. The dream, like the foam on your beer, dissipates. You step back out into the afternoon light, which seems harsher now, and retrace your steps to the factory gates. The second half of the day is longer, the fatigue deeper, the monotony more grinding. Your movements become purely mechanical, your mind a numb blank. The hopeful anger of the pub is replaced by a dull, heavy ache that settles in your very bones. As the dim afternoon wears on, accidents wait in the wings of your inattention. The factory is a hungry beast. It claims fingers from the careless piecer caught in the unguarded gears. It sends a shower of sparks into the eyes of the foundryman. It collapses a rack of finished bricks onto the back of a labourer. For you, the danger might be quieter, but no less sure. In the flax mill, the air is blue with fine fibres that you breathe deeply for 12 hours a day. It settles in your lungs, a soft, stubborn harvest that slowly, over years, hardens into a fatal husk. They call it mill fever, or grinder's rot, or simply a decline. There is no dramatic accident report, just a weakening cough, a shortening of breath, a gradual fading. You work until you can no longer stand at your machine. Then you are let go. There is no pension, only the ominous term disabled or worn out. Your savings, if they existed, vanish in weeks. The final journey is often not home, but to the parish workhouse, that dreaded fortress of last resort, where you are separated from your family and your labour is exchanged for a bare subsistence, a silent and shameful epilogue to a life spent fueling the Empire's glory. As you trudge home in the true twilight, the factory's shadow clinging to you in the form of soot and exhaustion, the memory of the noontime pub feels like a story from someone else's life, a brief, bright coin spent in a currency of despair. The rhythm of your year is not dictated by a factory whistle, but by the sun, the rain, and the slow, inevitable turn of the seasons. Your body knows this calendar in its bones, in the ache of muscles used for different tasks as the earth cycles from sleep to fruitfulness and back again. Spring begins not on a calendar page, but on the morning the frost loses its final grip on the ploughed fields, leaving the dark earth soft and fragrant. The air is sharp, carrying the scent of wet soil and new growth. This is the time of sowing. You move in lines across the great open fields, a community bent to a single purpose. The work is back-breaking, a constant stoop and rise as you scatter seed from the pouch at your waist. But there is a solidarity in it. Voices carry across the furrows, jokes are shouted, sometimes a song rises, a slow old melody about love or loss that seems to root itself in the very ground you're planting. It is a song of hope, a plea to the earth disguised as music. The shared labour softens the hardship, the collective effort a thread stitching the village together for the task of survival. Summer is a building heat, a slow green wave that rises from the fields. Your work becomes maintenance, weeding, watching. But it is autumn that writes the final, exhausting chapter. Harvest is a frantic race against the weather and decay. The sun, now lower, casts long golden light over fields turned to a sea of trembling gold. You move through it with your sickle, the swish-swish thud of cutting and gathering the dominant sound for weeks. Every hand is needed. Men, women, children, old enough to walk, are in the fields from first light until dusk stains the sky purple. Your back becomes a single burning knot of pain. Your hands blister and callous anew. But there is a fierce, desperate joy in it too, a satisfaction as tangible as the weight of a sheaf of wheat. This is the culmination of the year's hope and toil gathered and bound. The harvest home supper, when it comes, is a riot of noise and simple, abundant food. The landlord might provide a cask of ale, and for one night the strict lines between cottage and hall blur in a haze of gratitude and exhaustion. The following market day in the nearest town is the moment of reckoning. You bring what little surplus you have, a few chickens, some eggs, a sack of grain, to trade for the things you cannot make. A pot, a length of cloth, a new file for sharpening tools. The square is a chaos of noise and barter, the air rich with the smells of animals, baking bread, and humanity. Here your labour is translated into coin, a fragile and fleeting token of your year's effort. Yet the shadow over this cycle is long and permanent. The land you work, the cottage you sleep in, the very path from your door to the field likely belongs to another man. He lives in the big house, visible on the rise, its windows gleaming with a glassy confidence. Your relationship with him is a delicate, perpetual dance of dependence and resentment. The rent is a fixed sum, due regardless of the quality of the harvest. A bad season, a blighted crop, and that rent becomes a millstone around your family's neck. You pay not only in coin or a share of your grain, but in days of labour on his home farm, repairing his fences, digging his ditches. This is your asterisk boon work asterisk, a remnant of older feudal times. It is work done under the eye of his steward, work for which you're often paid with a meagre meal or not at all. It is a constant reminder of your place. His benevolence is celebrated at Christmas with a gift of coal or a joint of meat, a ritual of charity that reinforces the hierarchy. His oppression is felt in the relentless demand for rent, in the enclosure of common lands that once allowed you to graze a cow or gather firewood, pushing you further into the cash economy he controls. Your dignity is wrested from the skill of your hands and the independence of your spirit, but it exists within a cage of his making. You are a tenant, and your hold on your livelihood is as secure as the landlord's whim and the weather's mercy. Within the walls of your cottage, another, quieter engine of survival runs from before dawn until long after dark, and it is powered by the women. Her day begins in the cold dark earlier than yours, to bank the fire and set the porridge to cook. While you go to the fields, her domain fractures into a dozen simultaneous tasks. She might be with you during the harvest, her back bent alongside yours, but her responsibility doubles back upon itself. The children are with her, or if they're old enough, put to work scaring crows or gleaning the stray grains left behind. She carries the infant with her, a constant weight on her hip or back. Water must be fetched not from a handy pump, but often from a distant well or stream. Laundry is a day-long siege of boiling, scrubbing on a washboard, and wringing out a steam-filled battle against dirt. The garden plot behind the cottage is her province, a vital source of vegetables and herbs. She tends it, weeds it, harvests it. The cooking over the open hearth is a skilled dance with heat and smoke, transforming coarse flour and root vegetables into something edible. She preserves what she can for the barren winter, salts the pork, pickles the beans. In the evening, by the light of a rush dip, her hands are never still. She mends clothes, knits stockings, spins wool if you keep a sheep. Her labour is the mortar that holds the family together, her contributions vast, essential, and almost entirely invisible in the ledgers of the world. Her back aches from different angles, Her hands are chapped from different substances, but her exhaustion is the same profound currency. She dreams not of votes or wages, but of a full pantry, a healthy child, and perhaps, in a quiet moment, of a single hour where her hands are truly empty. This life of shared toil and shared vulnerability forges a community that is both a sanctuary and a prison. The village church is its spiritual and social heart. On Sunday, in your stiff, best clothes, you sit in your family pew, the smell of beeswax and damp stone filling your nose. Here the social order is sanctified from the pulpit. You're taught patience, humility, and acceptance of your station. Yet this same churchyard is where news is exchanged after the service, where alliances are formed and eyes are cast in judgment. Gossip is the village's nervous system, a swift, often cruel currency. A family falling behind on rent is noted. A daughter seen walking out with a young man from the next parish is discussed. Illness is a communal event. If fever takes hold in your cottage, the neighbours might first shy away in fear, but necessity soon brings them back. They will leave loaves of bread at your gate, offer to tend your animals, fetch the doctor whose bill they know you cannot pay. In times of birth or death, the women of the village arrive unbidden, taking over the kitchen, managing the chaos with a quiet, practiced efficiency. This is the warmth within the isolation, a recognition that in the face of nature's indifference and the landlord's remove, you only have each other. The help comes with strings of expectation and the burden of a reciprocal obligation, but it is real. It is the hand that pulls you from the ditch, the shared vigil by a sick bed, the collective sigh of relief when the last sheaf is brought in from the rain. You are bound to these people, for better and worse, by the simple, unbreakable fact of shared place and shared fate, a world away from the anonymous crush of the city, yet no less complex in its demands on the human heart. Your home, if you're one of the city's labourers, is not a refuge. It is the final, compressed stage of your day's exhaustion. The street you turn into is a canyon of soot-blackened brick, the buildings leaning toward each other as if whispering secrets of decay. The air in the close, narrow court is stagnant, holding the composite smell of the neighbourhood, the sour tang of the communal privy at the far end, the greasy odour of boiling bones from a dozen doorways, the pervasive damp that rises from clothes never fully dry and walls that sweat with condensation. You push open your door and the smell intensifies, becoming personal. It is the smell of old straw from the mattress, of mildew on the plaster, of the cheap tallow candle, of bodies and breath in a room with no through draught. This single room is your world. At night it holds you, your spouse, and your children, perhaps a lodger squeezed onto a pallet by the dying embers of the fire. There is no space for movement, only for arrangement. The floor is bare stone or rough boards, cold and often damp. The furniture is scant, a table, a stool or two, a box for clothes, the bed a dominant feature. In the corner a blackened hearth offers a meagre circle of warmth and light. Here, every domestic act is public. Arguments, illnesses, lovemaking, childbirth, all happen within these four walls, witnessed by all. There is no solitude, only a collective, grinding intimacy. As darkness falls, other inhabitants announce themselves. You hear the skittering in the walls, the scratch of tiny claws in the thatch if you're on the top floor. Rats are your constant, unwelcome roommates, bold enough to cross the floor as you sleep, seeking crumbs. The cry of a child in the night might be from hunger, from a rat's bite, or simply from the oppressive shared dream of the room itself. Venturing outside to the privy is a nightly trial. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and navigate the dark courtyard by memory, avoiding the worst of the puddles. The structure is a wooden shed over a pit shared by dozens. The stench is eye-watering, a physical presence. Inside, the seat is often broken, the space filthy. You do not linger. It is a place of necessity, not privacy, a humbling reminder of the most basic functions of life stripped of all dignity. Disease is not an abstract threat here. It is a neighbour. The damp chill breeds coughs that rack the body. The contaminated water from the well brings fevers and the terrifying swift violence of cholera. When sickness visits your room, There is no place to isolate the sufferer. The illness breathes with you, sleeps beside you. Recovery is a battle fought in a trench of shared air and shared germs. The home offers no protection. It is merely the container for life's frailties, amplifying them through proximity and want. A world of brick and mortar away, home wears an entirely different mask. Here, in the crescents and squares, the house stands tall and proud, its scrubbed steps and glossy black door a statement of separation. Inside, the air is different. It smells of beeswax polish, of coal dust contained within neat grates, of simmering soup from the below-stairs regions, a generally inoffensive, managed atmosphere. The space is not lived in so much as performed upon. The heart of this performance is the drawing room. This room is a testament to crowded emptiness. Every surface is covered. Small tables hold porcelain figurines. The walls are dense with paintings and mirrors. The furniture is upholstered in rich, dark fabrics, tufted and fringed. The piano, a colossal piece of polished mahogany, dominates one corner, a symbol of cultivation and female accomplishment. It is here that the rituals of society are observed. Afternoon tea is not a meal, but a ceremony. The silver pot, the delicate china cups, the thin sandwiches and small cakes, all are arranged with precise care. Conversation is a gentle art governed by invisible rules. Politics, religion and money are vulgar topics. One speaks of the weather, of mutual acquaintances, of a new novel from the circulating library. It is a ballet of manners, exhausting in its restraint, where a misplaced word or a clumsy gesture can signal ruin. This performance of ease and order is made possible by a hidden engine and by the architecture of silence. The back staircase, narrow and steep, is the true artery of the house. It is the domain of the servants, whose muffled footsteps and hushed voices are meant to be as invisible as their persons. They descend before the family wakes and ascend long after they retire, ghosts in their own workplace. Their rooms in the attic are cold, bare spaces, a world away from the plush warmth below. This separation is the foundation of the family's cherished privacy. The master can read his paper in the library undisturbed. The mistress can write letters in the morning room. The children can practice scales in the drawing room. Their solitude, their leisure, their very sense of self is purchased by the labour and enforced invisibility of others. The house is a stage, and the family members are the players, able to perform their roles only because an entire crew works unseen in the wings and the basement, ensuring the curtains rise on time and the set remains impeccable. In the countryside, the idea of home bends to older, sterner materials. Your cottage is likely built of the land itself. Stone and timber, wattle and daub, crowned with a thatch of straw or reed. It is low and seems to grow from the earth. Inside, the space is often just 2 rooms, or sometimes a single long room divided by use. The true heart, the pulsating centre, is the fireplace. It is not a neat iron grate, but a broad open hearth of stone, where the fire burns year-round. Its light dances on the smoke-darkened beams overhead. Its heat is the lifeblood of the home. This is where you cook, eat and gather. The furnishings are sparse and solid, made by your own hands or a village carpenter. A settle built into the wall by the fire, a heavy table, a dresser for pewter and pottery. Up a ladder-like staircase is the sleeping loft, a single space under the eaves where the whole family sleeps on mattresses stuffed with straw or flock. The bed itself might be a simple wooden frame, but often it is just the mattress on the floor, blankets piled high. You sleep surrounded by the gentle rustling of the thatch, the smell of dried herbs hung from the rafters to keep moths away, and the deep familiar silence of the fields outside. There is no plumbing, no gas light. Water is in the bucket by the door, light comes from the fire and from rush dips that spit and smoke. It is a life of elemental simplicity where your comfort is directly proportional to your own labour, fetching wood, mending the thatch, whitewashing the walls with lime. The home is not a display, but a shell for sustenance, its beauty found in function and endurance. Within these varied walls, the Victorian family ideal stood as a towering statue, but reality often carved away at its base with quiet, persistent tools. The ideal preached of the father as benevolent king, the mother as angel of the hearth, and children as obedient, innocent souls. For the middle classes, this could manifest as a stifling patriarchy. The father's authority was absolute, his word law. His home was his castle, and his wife and children were its subjects. A wife's property became his upon marriage. Her legal identity was submerged in his. Her realm was domesticity, a sphere of influence that was celebrated in poetry and painted as sacred, yet in practice was often one of managerial drudgery and social manoeuvring, all under the umbrella of his final approval. For the labouring poor, these ideals were a cruel parody. The father's authority was undermined by his inability to provide. His weariness could curdle into violence, his frustration taken out on those weaker. The mother, far from being a delicate angel, was a workhorse both inside and outside the home. Childhood innocence was a luxury quickly stripped by necessity. A child was another pair of hands, a potential wage earner by 6 or 7. The sentimental paintings of rosy-cheeked children at play were images from another planet. In your room, children were tiny, hungry, often sickly survivors, their laughter a rare sound amid the coughs and the worried whispers about rent. The ideal family was a picture on a wall in a well-furnished drawing room. In the single room of the tenement or the smoky cottage, family was simply the raw, unvarnished unit of mutual need, where love was often expressed through shared sacrifice and hardened by shared hardship, where the cracks in the statue were not flaws but the very architecture of survival. Food, for you, is not a pleasure but a calculation. Your hunger is a constant low-grade companion, a hollow feeling that begins an hour after your meagre breakfast and gnaws until the next scant meal. Your diet is a monotony of starch and shadow. Bread is the absolute foundation, the edible mortar of your existence. You buy it by the loaf, a dense greyish block made from the cheapest flour, adulterated with alum or chalk to add whiteness and weight. It is not tender, but it is filling. You tear into it with your teeth, a dry, crumbling substance that you must soften with your weak tea. The tea itself is little more than hot water stained brown with the dust of leaves that have been used and resold, brewed and rebrewed until they yield no flavour, only a faint bitterness. It is drunk for the illusion of warmth and the brief false energy it provides. Potatoes, when you can get them, are boiled in their jackets until soft, a bland, earthy bulk that stretches the meal. Meat is a Sunday luxury, if that. What you call meat is often the gristly, fatty offcuts the butcher cannot sell to better customers. A scrap of neck, a piece of shin, a bit of lung or liver. It goes into a stew with onions and whatever vegetable is cheapest, boiled for hours until it surrenders some semblance of flavour to the thin gravy. You eat it slowly, savouring each fibrous mouthful. Malnutrition wears your body down in subtle, relentless ways. Your skin is pale, prone to sores. Your teeth ache and loosen from the soft vitamin-deficient diet and the grit in the bread. The children are thin, their limbs like sticks, their bellies sometimes paradoxically swollen. They are listless, prone to fevers and rashes. You know they need milk, fresh vegetables, good meat, but these things are currencies of another world. Your entire economy revolves around the credit system of the local shop. You do not pay with coins so much as with promises. Your wife or you yourself go to the chandler's with an empty basket and a hesitant manner. The shopkeeper behind his counter knows your worth down to the last farthing. He notes your purchases in a greasy ledger. A half-pound of tea, 2 pounds of sugar, a loaf, a scoop of lentils. The tally grows through the week. On payday, you settle the account, watching a significant portion of your wages vanish before you even touch them. The system is a trap, for the prices are higher on credit, and the debt is a chain that keeps you bound to that shop, to that street, to that life. Some weeks, when sickness or short time cuts the wages, You must beg for further credit, facing the shopkeeper's cold stare, the humiliating pause as he consults his book, deciding if your character is good for another week's debt. The food you bring home from such an encounter tastes of shame and precarity, a bitter seasoning no amount of salt can hide. Step across the threshold into a middle-class dining room, and you enter a theatre where food is a prop in an elaborate play of social standing. Here, the day is divided into named meals, each with its own rules and costumes. Breakfast is substantial but informal, taken in the breakfast room. Luncheon is a light, often female affair, but dinner is the grand performance. The table is a battlefield of gleaming silver and starched linen. The centrepiece might be an epergne of glittering glass, reflecting the light from the gaselier above. Places are set with a bewildering array of cutlery, each piece with a designated purpose, a silent test of breeding for the uninitiated guest. The mistress of the house is the director of this nightly drama. Her management of the household accounts, her consultations with the cook in the morning, her approval of the menu are all unseen labours that culminate in this display. She must balance economy with show, ensuring the food is plentiful and fashionable without appearing extravagant or, worse, vulgar. Her presence at the foot of the table is a picture of graceful command, though her own meal is often interrupted by the need to oversee service, to encourage conversation, to silently signal the footman. The food itself is a procession of dishes served in the French style, à la Russe, where courses are brought sequentially by servants. Soup gives way to fish, fish to a joint of meat, the meat to game, then sweets, then a savoury, then dessert. It is a parade of abundance that can last for hours. Much of it is for display. A great baron of beef might be carved with ceremony, only a few slices taken from it before it is borne away. Vegetables are overcooked to a soft, uniform pulp. Sauces are rich and heavy, masking the natural flavours. The purpose is not sustenance, but spectacle. A successful dinner party is a marker of social credit, a way to display your wealth, your taste, your connections, and your wife's impeccable management. Conversations are a delicate minuet, avoiding controversy, focusing on art, literature, and approved gossip. The waste is staggering. The scraps from the plates, the untouched dishes, the bones and gristle, all are funneled down the back stairs. Some will become tomorrow's meal for the servants in the hall. The rest will be sold to the dealer in kitchen waste, who will in turn sell it to the poorest of the poor, completing a grim, circular economy that begins with presentation and ends once more with mere survival. In this dining room, you do not eat to live. You dine to be seen, to reinforce the walls of your world, using food as both brick and mortar. The clothes you wear are not merely a covering against the elements, they're a uniform, a declaration, and a prison. Your social rank is woven into the very fabric on your back, visible at a glance to anyone on the street. For the labouring man, the material is coarse, heavy wool or fustian, a thick, rough cloth meant for durability, not comfort. It is the colour of dirt and soot, of mud and shadow, designed to hide the stains of your trade. The cut is loose and practical, allowing for the swing of a hammer or the push of a cart. Your trousers are sturdy, your jacket patched at the elbows, your neckerchief a faded rag. Your boots are your most valuable possession, thick-soled and iron-rimmed, cracked and heavy, their leather soaked through with grease and street filth. They are tools, not ornaments. For the labouring woman, the dress is of the same coarse stuff, dark in colour, high-necked and long-sleeved, designed for modesty and work. It is shapeless, devoid of frivolity. A worn shawl, constantly rewrapped, provides scant warmth. A simple bonnet, its straw broken and frayed, shields your face from the rain and the stares of strangers. Your entire ensemble speaks of utility and want, a visual echo of the machine you serve or the street you sweep. Step up the social ladder, and the fabric softens, the palette lightens, the message changes. For the middle-class gentleman, the suit of black or sober grey is a suit of armour. The wool is fine, the tailoring precise, the lines imposing. The starched white collar is a hallmark, a glaring band of purity and restraint that chafes the neck, a daily discomfort accepted as the price of respectability. The top hat, that towering cylinder of polished beaver or silk, is the ultimate symbol. It adds a foot of imposing height, a declaration of substance and seriousness. It says you do not engage in manual labour. Your work is done with the mind, with ledgers and letters. For the lady, the dress is a complex architecture of fabric and morality. The corset, laced tight from youth, sculpts the torso into an unnatural rigid hourglass, restricting breath, bending ribs, proclaiming a delicate constitution unfit for toil. The skirts, supported by layers of petticoats or the later cage crinoline, billow out in a vast, impractical dome, a clear signal that the wearer does not navigate crowded streets or work in narrow spaces. The fabrics are silks, fine cottons, velvets, adorned with ribbons, lace and embroidery. Her clothing is a walking display of her husband's wealth, and her own virtuous idleness. The colours, the cut, the very restrictiveness of her garments are a code, broadcasting her class and her adherence to a rigid ideal of female propriety. To dress above your station is an act of social fraud, met with scorn. To dress below it is an unthinkable humiliation. The maintenance of these uniforms is a relentless, behind-the-scenes war against dirt and decay. For the poor, laundry is a Herculean monthly ordeal. There is no copper boiler in your room. You must haul water from the pump, heat it in your one pot over the fire, and scrub each garment by hand on a washboard, your knuckles raw against the ribbed metal. The soap is a coarse yellow bar that smells of tallow and lye, harsh on the skin and inefficient on ground in grime. You fight not just dirt, but the ingrained sweat of hard labour, the grease from machinery, the omnipresent soot of the city. Rinsing requires more precious water. Wringing out the heavy, sodden wool tests every muscle in your arms. Then comes the drying, a hopeless puzzle in a damp, sunless room. Clothes are draped over chairs, hung on lines strung across the ceiling, steaming gently and filling the space with a wet, woolly smell that never truly dissipates. Ironing, if done, is with a flat iron heated on the fire, a risky operation that can scorch the thin fabric in an instant. Every garment is nursed, patched and turned until it literally falls apart. A sock is darned until the darn outweighs the original wool. A shirt collar is frayed, then cut down and resewn to hide the wear. Your entire wardrobe is a testament to salvage. In the middle-class home, this battle is outsourced, but no less present as an economic calculation. The laundry is the domain of a separate servant, or sent out to a professional washerwoman. It is a significant line in the household accounts. The lady must manage this, ensuring shirts are bleached to a proper blinding white. Linens are starched to a crisp rustle, and delicate silks are handled without ruin. The smell here is of lavender water and starch, of flat irons heated on a dedicated range. The smooth, pressed perfection of a gentleman's shirt front is a quiet advertisement of a well-managed household. For the woman, the care of clothing extends to hours of fine needlework. Embroidery is a suitable pastime, but practical mending is constant. A loose button, a torn flounce, a worn hem, all must be repaired invisibly and promptly. The economy of appearances is strict. A family could be teetering on the edge of debt, but the master's suit and the mistress's dress must show no sign of wear or shabbiness. The polished boots, the gleaming hat, the immaculate gloves, these are the carapace that holds the fragile reality of their social position intact. In the endless cycle of washing, drying, ironing, mending and preserving, across all classes, the fight is the same, a struggle against entropy and poverty, using soap, thread, and sheer effort to maintain the fragile facade that your clothes are meant to project to a watching, judging world. Sunday morning arrives not as a day of rest, but as a day of different obligations. The factory whistles are silent, replaced by the pealing of church bells, a sound that rolls over the soot-stained rooftops with a clean metallic authority. For you, dressing for church is an exercise in presenting your best face to the community. Your Sunday clothes, though worn and carefully mended, are a shade better than your everyday rags. The walk to the parish church is a weekly procession of your neighbours, all scrubbed and solemn. Inside, the social order of the week is sanctified in stone and scripture. You sit in the free pews at the back or in the galleries, the hardwood of familiar discomfort. The families from the big houses have their own enclosed pews at the front, their presence a display of polished boots and rustling silk. The sermon you hear is often one of patience, humility, and contentment with the station God has appointed. The poor are told the kingdom of heaven is theirs, a future reward for present suffering. The rich are reminded of their Christian duty to charity. It is a message designed to soothe resentment and maintain the equilibrium. For your children, the church offers more than just a sermon. The Sunday school in the damp basement is a beacon of grim opportunity. Here, volunteer teachers, often well-meaning middle-class ladies, instruct the ragged pupils in basic reading with the Bible as the sole textbook. The lessons are as much about moral discipline as literacy, drilling into young minds the virtues of obedience, punctuality, and clean speech. For these women, it is an act of charitable mission, a foray into the exotic, troubling world of the poor. For you, it is a chance, however slim, for your child to grasp a tool you never had. If they can read, perhaps they can escape the factory floor, become a clerk or a shop assistant, ascend a single precious rung on the social ladder. The penny or two they might earn for perfect attendance is also a tangible help. The church, in this light, is not merely a spiritual centre, it is a social exchange. You trade your presence, your show of piety, for a sliver of education for your young and the fragile hope of charity in times of desperate need. It is an institution that both upholds the hierarchy and offers a narrow, conditional path within it. When the final hymn is sung and you step back into the mundane world, the true sanctuary for many a working man is not the echoing nave, but the warm, smoky embrace of the public house. The church offered heavenly future grace, the pub offers a very earthly present solace. The atmosphere here is the antithesis of the chapel's restrained silence. It is a wall of sound, raucous laughter, the thump of a fist on a table, the lively strain of a fiddle from the corner, the constant murmur of a dozen conversations. The air is thick and warm, rich with the smells of hops, sawdust, tobacco smoke, and wet wool. That first pint of porter, dark and bitter, is more than a drink. It is a medicine for the soul. It loosens the knots of the week's subjugation. Here, within these walls, you're not a hand or a drudge. You're a man among men, conversation flows freely, unguarded by the foreman's ear. Here, politics is not a vulgar topic, but a vital one. The talk is of wages and strikes, of the hated corn laws that keep bread prices high, of the Chartists and their demand for a voice. Dreams are voiced here that would be dangerous on the factory floor. Friendships are forged over shared pints, bonds that feel stronger for their confinement to this brief weekly window of freedom. It is a camaraderie born of shared struggle, a temporary republic where your worth is measured by your capacity for fellowship and your skill in argument, not by the speed of your loom. Yet this freedom is as fragile as the foam on your beer. It lasts only as long as your pennies hold out. When your money is gone, the magic evaporates. You step back into the cold street, the echoes of laughter fading, the weight of the coming Monday settling back onto your shoulders. The pub is not an escape, but a pause, a deeply necessary illusion of autonomy in a life scripted by others. The leisure of the middle classes is a performance of a different kind, governed by invisible scripts and the relentless clock of social expectation. Their Sunday might include a sedate family walk in the park, a display of prosperity and propriety, but the true theatre of their leisure is the home, particularly the drawing room. Reading is a common pursuit, but it is a curated one. The books chosen from the circulating library are expected to improve the mind or reflect well on the reader's taste. Histories, sermons, volumes of poetry, the morally uplifting novels of writers like Dickens or Mrs. Gaskell. The piano is the room's altar. Hours of a daughter's childhood are sacrificed to its mastery, not for personal joy, but so she can perform a piece when company calls, her accomplishment reflecting credit on her mother's training and the family's cultivation. The music is usually sentimental, technically precise, and emotionally contained. The most characteristic leisure activity, however, is the formal social call. This is a ritual as rigid as a minuet. Cards are left, specific days are set aside for being at home. Visits are short, precisely timed. Conversation is an art of avoidance. Light, agreeable, skirting any topic of substance or controversy. The refreshments are minimal, a small glass of sherry, a piece of cake. The entire visit is an exercise in social reconnaissance and display. You assess the furnishings of your acquaintance's home, the quality of their china, the behaviour of their children. You, in turn, present your own household as a model of order and taste. It is leisure that feels like work, a duty required to maintain the network of connections that underpins your social and economic world. There is laughter here too, but it is measured plight. The goal is not release, but reinforcement of bonds of status, the comforting, intricate web of rules that separates us from the noisy, ale-scented world of them. For the children of the poor, education was less a path to enlightenment than a brief and conditional interlude before the real work of life began. The factory school, where it existed, was often held in a corner of the mill itself, the droning voice of the teacher competing with the ceaseless thunder of the machinery. Lessons were simple, mechanical, focused on the bare essentials of reading and arithmetic deemed useful for a future employee. The primary textbook was the Bible, and the primary lesson was obedience. Discipline was harsh, quick, and physical. The goal was not to create thinkers, but to create punctual, literate, and docile workers who could read a notice, count their wages, and understand the factory rules. For many more, the only schooling was the Sunday school, a single day's fragmentary instruction sandwiched between 6 days of labour. Literacy was a prize that remained elusive for a vast swath of the population. A child's economic value as a wage earner far outweighed the nebulous future benefit of an education. Why waste years in a schoolroom when the family needed pennies now? This created a self-perpetuating cycle. The children of labourers denied proper education remained trapped in manual, unskilled trades, perpetuating the class divide. Meanwhile, the children of the middle classes were groomed in private schools or by governesses, learning not just reading and writing but history, geography, French and music, the cultural capital that would allow them to assume their roles as managers, professionals and ladies of leisure. Education, therefore, was not the great leveller but one of the sturdiest buttresses of the class system. It took the raw material of childhood and processed it according to its origin, polishing the stone of the middle class for positions of command and roughly shaping the clay of the working class for a lifetime of silent, semi-literate toil. The classroom, like the church and the factory, was a place where you learned your place, and that lesson was the most indelible one of all. Disease was a tenant in your home, a silent, unwelcome lodger who paid no rent but demanded everything. It lived in the damp walls, swam in the contaminated water of the communal pump, and rode on the foul air of the overcrowded courts. The epidemics came not as single visitors, but as a grim procession. Cholera was the most terrifying, a swift and democratic killer. It struck without warning, turning a healthy body into a racked, shuddering shell in hours. The symptoms were hideously public. Violent vomiting and diarrhoea that drained the life from a person until they lay blue and shriveled on the floor. The smell in a room struck by cholera was particular, a sweet, putrid odour that signified death. It swept through the rookeries like a fire, following the labyrinth of filth, taking the young and the old, the weak and the strong. It respected no class, though it feasted most heartily in the slums. Typhus, the jail fever, bred in the filth and was carried by lice. It brought a burning fever and a dark rash, a slower but no less deadly sentence. And always there was the white plague, consumption. It was a slow, wasting spectre, a cough that grew persistent, a gradual fading of colour and flesh, a romanticised disease in poetry, but a cruel, lingering reality in your single room. You watched a parent, a sibling, a child slowly diminish, their breath becoming a ragged, painful sound in the night, until they were gone. The sheer scale of death in the poorest districts was a fact of life, a statistical horror woven into the fabric of existence. Infant mortality was so high that baptisms were often hurried, and parents learned a hard emotional economy, not daring to invest too much love in a newborn until it had survived its first year. The constant presence of death bred a certain grim pragmatism, but it also began, slowly, to stir a new kind of fear in those with power. The diseases of the poor would not stay confined. Cholera spread from the slums to the leafy squares. The connection between filth and sickness became impossible to ignore. This dawning awareness, driven by fear as much as compassion, sparked the first faltering steps of a public health movement. Men like Edwin Chadwick began to write furious reports, their pages filled with numbers that screamed of preventable death. They argued not from charity but from utility. A healthy worker was a productive worker. A dead pauper was a burden on the parish rates. Slowly, agonisingly slowly, the idea took hold that clean water, proper sewerage and the removal of nuisances were not luxuries but necessities for the city itself to survive. It was a revolution born of panic and calculation, but it began to shift the very ground beneath your feet, promising a future where the pump at the corner might not be a sentence of death. When death did come, it was met with rituals as starkly divided as life itself. For you, a funeral was a hasty, harried affair, a logistical and financial nightmare. There was no money for a doctor's certificate, for a proper coffin, for a plot in a consecrated churchyard. The body was laid out on the table in the single room, washed by weary family hands. A neighbour might lend a black ribbon or a crepe band for the door. The coffin, if you could afford one, was plain pine hastily assembled. If you could not, the parish provided a rough shell. The procession to the burial ground was short. The mourners few, exhausted family and a handful of neighbours who knew their turn would come. The service at the graveside was brief, the curry hurrying through the words. The burial itself was often in a pauper's trench, a long open pit where coffins were stacked one upon another, covered with quicklime and a shallow layer of earth. There was no headstone, no permanent marker. Your loved one vanished into the anonymous, hungry ground, their memory preserved only in the cramped, aching space they left in the room and in your heart. It was an end that mirrored their life, crowded, unceremonious, and swiftly absorbed by the relentless city. For the middle and upper classes, death was an opportunity for a different kind of display. The home was transformed into a theatre of mourning. Mirrors were draped in black cloth. Clocks were stopped at the hour of death. The body was laid in a darkened front parlour, adorned with flowers, visited by streams of solemn callers in deep black. The coffin was heavy, polished oak with ornate brass fittings. The funeral procession was a public spectacle, a hearse drawn by plumed horses, followed by a long line of mourning carriages, their blinds drawn. The burial was in a private purchased plot in a new garden-like cemetery, a place of winding paths and ornate angels, a permanent stone testament to the family's status and their respectable grief. Mourning itself became a sartorial prison, especially for women. Widows were expected to wear deep, unrelieved black for a year and a day, followed by periods of half mourning in greys and purples. The rules were complex and unforgiving. To break them was to show disrespect. For the poor, grief was a raw, immediate wound, soon buried under the daily struggle to survive. For the wealthy, it was a protracted, expensive performance, a ritual that confirmed their place in a social order that extended even beyond the grave. In the face of such vulnerability, people forged their own fragile networks of survival, often tinged with the bitterness of charity. The official charity of the well-to-do was a double-edged sword. The visiting lady from the benevolent society would arrive at your door, her notebook in hand, her gaze assessing your cleanliness, your children's behaviour, the state of your hearth. A loaf of bread or a ticket for coal was granted, or withheld based on her judgment of your worthiness. It was aid laced with moral scrutiny, a reminder that your suffering was perhaps your own fault, a lesson in gratitude and submission. The ultimate dread, however, was the workhouse. It loomed at the edge of every poor person's consciousness, a fortress of last resort. To enter its gates was to surrender everything. Families were split up, men, women, and children sent to separate, barren wings. The food was scant, the work brutal and often pointless, like breaking stones or picking oakum. The regime was designed to be more miserable than the poorest independent life, to deter all but the utterly desperate. It was a punishment for poverty, a final, humiliating stripping of dignity. In response, working people began to build their own bulwarks from below. The Friendly Society or the Burial Club was a grassroots lifeline. You paid a few pennies a week into a common fund. In return, if you fell sick, you might receive a small weekly payment to keep the landlord at bay. When you died, the club would pay for a funeral, sparing your family the ultimate shame of a pauper's grave. These societies were about more than money. They were about mutual respect and collective self-respect. In the pub back room or the rented hall, you were not a supplicant but a member, entitled to support you had paid for. It was a fragile, self-made safety net, a declaration that even in the depths of poverty you could still claim a measure of control and honour. And from this same soil of shared struggle, a more defiant hope began to grow. The sense of being not just unfortunate individuals, but a class with common grievances started to crystallise. The early trade unions were illegal, secretive things meeting in darkness, but their aim was simple: to bargain collectively for better wages and shorter hours. The real spark, however, was political. The People's Charter, with its 6 demands for universal male suffrage, secret ballots, and salaries for MPs so that working men could serve, became a banner. It was a dream not of charity, but of power. To have a vote was to have a voice, to be a citizen, not just a subject or a hand. Chartist meetings drew thousands. They marched, they petitioned, they published newspapers. The authorities met them with fear and repression. Rallies were broken up. Leaders were arrested and transported to Australia. There were moments of violent confrontation, but the movement's true power was in its simple, profound assertion that the man who weaved the cloth, who forged the iron, who built the city deserved a say in its government. The Charter itself failed in Parliament, but the hope it represented did not die. It planted a seed, a vision of a different future where your worth was not determined by the clothes you wore or the dirt on your hands, but by your common humanity and your shared labour. In the meeting hall, listening to a speaker give voice to your deepest frustrations, you felt not the chill of the grave, but the dangerous warming heat of a possibility not yet extinguished. The final factory whistle releases you into the evening, but it does not release you from weariness. You carry it home in your bones, a deep ache that no amount of sitting will ease. The walk back is slower, a trudging procession of grey figures dissolving into the twilight shadows of familiar courts. Inside your room, the brief false energy of the pub has faded entirely. What greets you is the accumulated weight of domestic need. The room is colder now, the fire from the morning long dead, and the chill of the stone walls seems to have deepened in your absence. The first task is to rekindle that tiny flame, to boil water for tea, to assemble the meagre evening meal from whatever scraps remain. The light comes from a single oil lamp, its flame low to save fuel, casting a wobbly, sooty circle that pushes back the corners of the room but cannot defeat them. In this dim, smoky pool, life contracts to its smallest, most essential motions. Your wife's hands, red and chapped from the day's washing, are never still. She mends a tear in a shirt, her needle darting in and out of the fabric with a rhythm as steady and relentless as the loom she might have left hours before. A child's sock is darned, the wool rough and lumpy under her fingers. There is little talk. Words cost energy you do not have. Silence is the default, but it is a fragile one, stretched thin over unspoken anxieties. The rent is due. The child's cough sounds worse. The foreman looked at you sideways today. Sometimes the silence snaps. A sharp word about money, a complaint about the cold stew, a child's whining met with a sudden, explosive shout that echoes in the small space, followed by a heavier, guilt-ridden quiet. But there are other sounds too. On a rare good night, perhaps a Saturday after a full pay packet, a different mood might descend. Someone remembers an old song, a music hall tune or a hymn. It is hummed at first, then quietly sung. Others might join in, their voices rough and unpracticed. For a few minutes the room is filled not with the thunder of machines or the shuffle of feet, but with a fragile human melody. It is a fleeting spell, broken by a cough or the cry of the baby, but in that moment the room is transformed. The light from the poor lamp seems warmer. The press of bodies feels like companionship rather than crowding. It is a glimpse of what home could be, a poignant reminder of the resilience that flickers, like the lamp flame itself, against the vast encroaching dark. Behind the heavy drapes of a middle-class drawing room, evening unfolds as a curated performance of domestic harmony. The gas lamps are lit, their hissing light steadier and brighter than any oil flame, illuminating every detail of the well-ordered room. The family gathers, but their leisure is purposeful. The father might retreat behind the fortress of his newspaper, a signal of his right to quiet contemplation. The mother often takes up her needlework, embroidery or knitting, her hands busy with decorative, not remedial labour. The children are expected to occupy themselves quietly with books or simple toys. Conversation is present, but it is regulated. It might turn to the plans for the week, a piece of news from the paper deemed suitable for general discussion, or mild commentary on a visitor from earlier in the day. A more formal entertainment might be the reading aloud of a novel. It is a shared, improving activity. The reader, often the mother or an elder daughter, performs the text with feeling, while the others listen, their hands occupied with quiet tasks. The story, a moral tale by Dickens perhaps, or an adventure by Sir Walter Scott, transports them to other worlds, yet the setting reinforces their own. The room is a capsule of safety and culture, insulated from the rawness of the street. Card games are another staple, but they're games of skill and manners, like whist or chess, not games of chance. They're played with a polite intensity, a display of mental acuity and good sportsmanship. The talk during these games is light, punctuated by the soft snap of cards on the baize table or the click of a chess piece. Laughter is measured, never raucous. The entire evening is a ritual of cohesion, a daily reaffirmation of the family unit as a civilized, self-contained entity. It is leisure as a duty, a necessary expenditure of time to maintain the social and emotional bonds that underpin their world. When the clock on the mantel strikes a certain hour, the ritual concludes. Lamps are turned down, good nights are said with formal affection, and the family disperses to their separate, private bedrooms, each person retiring into a solitude the working-class family could never imagine. In the countryside, nightfall draws the world inward to a single fiery source. As the last grey light bleeds from the sky, your universe becomes the circle of warmth thrown by the hearth. The day's outdoor labour is done, the animals settled. The family gathers on the settle, on stools, on the floor, their bodies orienting towards the flames like planets to a sun. This is not a time of formal entertainment, but of slow communal productivity and memory. The hands are still busy, but the pace is different. A man might whittle a wooden spoon or repair a harness. A woman might spin wool with a drop spindle. The rhythmic twist and pull of her fingers a soothing ancient motion. Children might shell peas or sort beans for tomorrow. In this space, talk flows more easily. The stories told here are not from books, but from life and from a past that feels close enough to touch. An elder might recount the great snow of 36, or the time the fox got into the hens. There are older tales too, fragments of folklore passed down, stories of the fairy folk said to dwell in the old oak copse, warnings about will-o'-the-wisps in the marsh, local ghosts that walked on certain nights. These are not told as mere fancies, but as a kind of inherited truth, a way of explaining the mysteries of the land and the weather. The stories are punctuated by the crackle of the fire, the soft scratch of a knife on wood, the steady whir of the spinning wheel. This is where the community's oral history is kept alive, where children learn their place not just in the family, but in the long chain of generations who have worked this same soil. The room is thick with the smell of wood smoke, of drying herbs, of warm wool and simple food. It is a profound, unspoken intimacy, a feeling of being rooted and sheltered, connected to each other and to the rhythm of the earth, in a way that the city dweller, for all his gaslight and newspapers, has utterly lost. When the last tale is told and the embers begin to glow a deep red, the final universal ritual begins, the retreat to sleep. The nature of that retreat, however, is worlds apart. In the workers' room, sleep is a collective collapse. The bed is not a place of privacy, but a shared territory. You lie down beside your spouse. The children, a tangle of limbs at your feet or in a corner pallet. The warmth is bodily, a necessary exchange of heat in the unheated room. The textures are rough. The coarse linen, the lumpy straw or flock of the mattress, the weight of all the blankets and coats piled on top for insulation. The chamber pot under the bed is a nightly necessity, its presence a faint, shameful smell in the dark. The sounds are the sounds of other lives, coughing, snoring, the rustle of straw as someone turns, the distant cry of a baby in another room, the skittering of vermin in the walls. You fall asleep not to silence, but to the muffled symphony of communal existence. Fear is a bedfellow too. The fear of the landlord's knock, of a child's worsening fever, of the sheer precariousness that a single day's illness could unravel everything. In the wider countryside, the cold is even more assertive. You might wake in the deepest part of the night to see your breath hanging in a cloud in the moonlight shafting through a crack in the shutter. On a severe night, a rim of frost, delicate and white, traces the inside of the window ledge. The water in the jug by the washstand has a skin of ice. You pull the blankets tighter, burrowing towards the other warm bodies in the bed, listening to the wind moan in the chimney. In the middle-class bedroom, with its fireplaces and heavier curtains, the cold is less aggressive, but the solitude can be vast. You lie in a cavernous bed, the space around you empty and dark, the silence profound and strangely heavy. Across all these experiences, the act of sleep is not a gentle surrender, but a hard-won victory over cold, worry and exhaustion. You drift off, clinging to the frail warmth of the bedclothes and the other bodies within them, hoping the morning finds you rested and not stiff with a cold that has seeped into the room and into your very joints as you slept. The dawn, when it comes, is not a gentle awakening, but a summons back to the struggle, the thin light revealing the same four walls, the same demands, the same long road of the day ahead. The world you inhabit today, with its humming offices, its structured weekends, and its intricate, often unspoken social codes, is not a sudden creation. It is the direct, tangible inheritance of the Victorian age, an era whose rhythms and rules were forged in the furnace of industry and etched into the consciousness of ordinary people. The transition is stark, yet deceptively smooth. You no longer enter through soot-blackened gates to the shriek of a steam whistle, but through glass doors to the chime of a digital clock-in system. The vast, noisy loom room has been replaced by the open-plan office, a landscape of partitioned desks and silent computer screens. The air is no longer thick with cotton dust or the smell of hot metal, but is cooled and circulated, odourless and artificial. The physical danger has largely receded. traded for a different kind of strain. The ache of eyes fixed on a monitor, the tension of a neck held in one position for hours, the mental fatigue of processing endless streams of information. Yet, beneath this clean, quiet surface, the fundamental architecture of industrial work culture remains unbroken. Your time is still not your own. It is segmented, measured, and owned by the enterprise. The factory's bell has evolved into the timesheet, the project deadline, the relentless ping of email and instant messages that bleed into the evening. The foreman's watchful eye is now embedded in productivity software, in key performance indicators, in the subtle pressure of managerial expectations. The discipline demanded is no longer just physical, but cognitive and emotional, a constant performance of engagement, efficiency, and availability. The division of labour is more complex, but no less rigid. You're a specialist in a vast interconnected machine you seldom see in its entirety. The pursuit of efficiency, that Victorian god first worshipped in the mill and the foundry, now drives algorithms that optimise every click and keystroke. You may work in ergonomic comfort, but you're still, in a profound sense, serving the rhythm of a machine, its nature digital rather than mechanical, its control more pervasive and internalised. The legacy is not the dirt and the danger, but the idea of work as a totalising system, a primary identity, and a force that organises the very hours of your life and the geography of your cities. The long shadows of Victorian class and gender distinctions stretch across our modern landscape, warped by time but still casting familiar shapes. The rigid hierarchy of the great house, the family above stairs, the servants below, has softened into the corporate ladder and the subtle, often unbreachable barriers of professional networks. Access to certain careers, certain neighbourhoods, certain schools still follows lines that would be recognisable to a Victorian social observer, though now expressed through property prices, university affiliations, and cultural capital rather than title alone. The belief in self-improvement and social mobility, a fervent Victorian creed, is now our dominant national story, yet the starting blocks remain staggeringly uneven, just as they were when the child in the mine had no books and the child in the nursery had a governess. The Victorian ideal of separate spheres for men and women has shattered, but the cracks still show. Women fill offices and boardrooms, yet the expectation of being the primary manager of the home, the angel of the hearth in modern, multitasking guise, persists with remarkable tenacity. The double shift of the working mother would be intimately understood by her Victorian counterpart, who laboured in the factory by day and managed the single room by night. The moral coding of clothing has relaxed, but fashion remains a language of identity and status. The gentleman's top hat is gone, but the tailored suit still speaks of authority. The corset has been burned, but an entire industry pressures women towards a different, yet still punishing ideal of form. The reform movements born of Victorian suffering, the fight for public health, for education, for workers' rights, for women's suffrage, are the very bedrock of our modern social conscience. We argue over their legacy, over how far they have truly come, but the framework for our debates about equality, welfare and justice was constructed in those smoky meeting halls and inked onto those passionate petitions. We are still living in the long aftermath of their struggle. You move through a world built in more ways than you can count by Victorian minds. The physical infrastructure is the most obvious. The railways that first shrank the nation still form the skeleton of your travel. The postal system they standardised is the ancestor of every global logistics network. The sprawling brick terraces they built for workers define the character of your cities. But the more profound inventions are the intangible ones. They gave us the weekend, that sacred pause wrested from the unrelenting 7-day work week. They gave us the concept of retirement and the first fragile pension schemes, an acknowledgement that a worn-out body deserved something beyond the workhouse. They gave us the public library, the municipal park, the idea that Clean water and sanitation were not private luxuries but public rights. They developed the modern bureaucracy, the system of records and rules that governs your life from birth certificate to death certificate, a system of impersonal order that replaced arbitrary feudal power. Even your sense of time is theirs. The railway demanded standardized time zones, forcing whole regions to synchronize their clocks, imposing a uniform rhythm on a nation of local sun times. Their obsession with measurement and classification laid the groundwork for modern science, medicine, and social policy. They lived through the first true information explosion, with the mass production of newspapers and books, and wrestled with its disorienting effects, a precursor to our own digital age. We've replaced their gaslight with LED bulbs, their telegrams with smartphones, their pen and ink with word processors, but the underlying systems, the networks, the schedules, the very expectation of progressive improvement are Victorian software running on 21st century hardware. Their drive to order, to control, to improve, and to exploit created the template for the modern world, for both its astonishing comforts and its pervasive anxieties. In the end, the most enduring legacy of the Victorian age is not found in its machines or its monuments, but in the quiet, stubborn resilience of the ordinary people who endured its trials. They were the ones who bore the weight of the progress, who choked on its smoke, who fueled its engines with their sweat and their shortened lives. Their story is not one of passive suffering. In the face of a world being remade at a dizzying, brutal pace, they fought to carve out spaces of dignity. They found it in the loyalty of a shared bed on a freezing night, in the solidarity of a whispered complaint in the pub, in the solemn mutual promise of the burial club. They found it in the patient teaching of a Sunday school volunteer, in the shared hymn in a crowded church, in the defiant hope of a Chartist song. They found it in the simple skilled turn of a lathe, in the clean straight furrow of a plough, in the perfectly sewn seam. They adapted, they improvised, they formed communities of mutual aid, and they slowly, painfully, began to demand a share of the future they were building. When you sit in your climate-controlled room, when you turn on a tap and trust the water is clean, when you take a Saturday for yourself, you're benefiting from battles they fought, often without knowing they would ever be won. The modern world, with all its complexities, rests upon the foundation of their labour, and upon the gradual, hard-won acceptance that the men and women who toiled in the mills and the fields were not mere hands, but human beings deserving of light, of health, of time, and of a voice. Their legacy is the very possibility of your comfort, and their enduring lesson is that human dignity is not a gift bestowed by progress, but a flame carefully, courageously guarded in the darkest of nights, passed hand to hand until it could at last burn a little brighter for us all. Now let the images fade, let the noises recede. Let the chill of the stone room, the shriek of the factory whistle, the smell of the oil lamp and the wet wool slowly dissolve into the quiet darkness behind your eyelids. You're here, in your own time. The air around you is still and likely warm. There is no damp seeping from the walls, no draught knife sharp from an arrow slit. The light, when you chose to turn it off, vanished at the touch of a switch, not by the guttering death of a candlewick. The silence you hear is not the profound, waiting silence of a pre-industrial night, but a soft, electrical hum, the faint pulse of a world that never fully sleeps. The bed you lie in is your own. The space around you, whether large or small, is yours. You can stretch out your limbs without touching another sleeping body unless you choose to. You can breathe deeply, trusting the air to be clean or clean enough. The greatest, most extraordinary luxury of your modern night is this: the simple expectation of safety, of warmth, and of a peace that is not a hard-won truce with the elements, but a default condition. This is the foundation upon which your rest is built, so fundamental you likely never consider it at all. Consider it now. The distance between your reality and theirs is not merely a century and a half, it is a chasm of experience. You tossed aside your blanket earlier because you were too warm. A child in a Lambeth garret shivered under every scrap of cloth the family owned, the frost painting the inside of the window. You complained about the tedious commute on a crowded train. A match girl walked miles on broken boots to stand for 14 hours in poisonous air, her lungs burning. You felt a moment of annoyance when the Wi-Fi was slow. A weaver's entire family lived in terror of the penny doctor's bill, knowing illness could mean the workhouse. Your day is framed by rights they fought for with petitions, protests and shattered bodies. The right to a weekend, to a limit on hours, to a place for your children that is a schoolroom, not a workshop. Your food, even the simplest of it, arrives with a guarantee of safety they could not dream of. Your water comes clean from a tap, a miracle that would have saved millions of their children. The very ache in your back from a long day at a desk is a different kind of fatigue, born of a different kind of captivity. The pressures you face are real, often profound, but they are not, for the most part, the immediate physical battle for survival that defined every single day and night of their existence. Your struggles are against complexity, theirs were against raw necessity. Your anxieties are often for a future of potential, theirs were for the next meal, the next week's rent, the next breath free of cholera. As you hover in this space between wakefulness and sleep, let your mind hold not just the contrast, but the connection. The comfortable world you drift within was bought piece by painful piece by people whose names are lost. The woman who stitched 100 shirts a day by the poor light of a tallow dip, her eyes failing by 30. The man who coughed his life into the fibrous air of the mill, never knowing why. The child who sat in the dark of the mine guiding the carts, who never grew tall. The countless fathers who swallowed their pride at the chandler's counter, the mothers who calculated the last crumb, the boys and girls who knew work before they knew play. History books record the monarchs, the inventors, the prime ministers, but the true architects of the modern age were these anonymous millions. They were the human fuel, the living machinery. Their hopes were not for grandeur, but for a full belly, a dry room, a Sunday of peace. Their courage was not in dramatic acts, but in the daily decision to get up, to go on, to endure another relentless day for the sake of those they loved. They dreamed, in their fleeting moments of rest, of a warmth they could not keep, of a fullness they rarely felt, of a security that was always just out of reach. You are living tonight in the substance of their faintest, most desperate hopes. The solid roof, the locked door, the warm blanket, the nourished child asleep in the next room. These were the distant stars of their universe. So as you settle deeper into your pillow, let a thought, soft and grateful, pass toward them. Do not pity them from the height of your comfort. Honour them. See them not as grey figures in a grim documentary, but as individuals with faces worn by weather and worry, with hands cracked from labour, with spirits that somehow found fragments of joy in a song, in a shared joke, in the grasp of a child's hand. They passed the world on, scarred and changed, to us. They built the foundations, often with their broken health and buried dreams, upon which our lighter lives are constructed. Now, let the last echo of the past fade into the calm of your present. Feel the weight of your own blanket, a weight of comfort, not oppression. Hear the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, or the quiet sounds of your own sleeping house. The long vigil of the Victorian night is over. The cold has been banished. The machines are silent. The struggle is held at bay by the walls they helped unknowingly to build. You are safe. You are warm. You are the beneficiary of a long, painful, and ultimately hopeful human story. Carry that knowledge not as a burden, but as a quiet, profound gratitude into your dreams. Let it soften the edges of your own worries, and let it remind you of the incredible, fragile luxury of a peaceful night. The past settles into its rest. Now you may settle into yours. Good night.